Welcome everyone. My name is Camille Koster, and I will be teaching you about creating a financially sustainable life. I am of Cherokee descent and have lived the majority of my life on Cherokee tribal land. I currently work for a company called the IDRS Acorn Project, and I've done youth development and worked with youth in the youth industry for over 20 years. So let's get started. So, when we're talking about creating a financially sustainable life, we're really talking about today what we call money, but in our past, our ancestors have called it resources. So, if you think about the stories that you've heard as your ancestors and your elders have talked, what has been used for currency in your tribe in the past? Was it beads? Was it beadwork? Was it tanning hides and bartering? Um, was it farming? Was it herding? What was it? Because our lives as Native Americans have been very intriguing when it comes to how we had great systems of bartering and trade when other people were using money and coins. So today, as we go into this, I want you to take a few minutes and just think about, what is it that you've used from the land or your ancestors have used from the land that has been a great resource to be able to take care of the families in your community, to sustain your tribe and your tribal communities. So, as we talk about money, we also need to talk about culture. So, what is culture? Culture is a set of shared beliefs, once again, passed down from previous generations. And it is something that's passed down in the stories, it's passed down in the language. Our culture is passed down in our beliefs of how we do things. And so, when we talk about money and culture, they're very intertwined. So, let's dive in and talk a little bit more about this. So, for most of us, we know the values of our culture. So, whether we value family or language, or whether we value the land or ceremonies. So, why is this so important? Well, how a tribe believes in their culture and their values is usually where they invest their money. So, just like that, we're very similar. So, wherever we have value, or wherever we think things are important, or we put importance on things, that's how we're going to spend our money. And so let's look at this next sheet. And I want you guys just to take a few seconds and write down a couple of these values on this sheet that you would say your tribe or your community really believes in. What's really important to them? This is important for you because these are things that have been passed down to you and that you see every day. Now, in addition to your community or your tribal values, you will have individual values. So this is what you think is important, and this is based on, things that you've learned, experiences you've had, all sorts of things. And so what I would love for you to do right now is just take a quick screenshot of this, because we don't have time today to really have you dive in and look at your top 10, but I'd love for you guys at some point after this session to look at your top 10 values, because when you look at what you value, it will be in line with how you spend your money if you have a great money management plan. So once again, if you hadn't taken a screenshot, I'm going to give you just another second or two to do that. Okay, so as we talk about money, let's talk a little bit about our families. So our families either have educated us about money or not educated us about money, or somewhere in the middle. I was someone that my family never talked about money. I didn't know if we had a budget or not. I didn't know what we could spend at the grocery store. I never knew if when I asked for something, we had the money. I honestly never really thought about it because we never talked about money. And then you have parents that maybe talk about money, but maybe it's about not having enough, or there's never enough. So there's all these different things that come into play. So as we approach money, I want to just talk about a couple myths that we commonly hear and we commonly see. So when it comes to creating a money management plan or budget, there's a couple things that people don't believe, or they think that people with money do differently. So the first myth that I want to talk about is people with money spend it however and wherever they want. And you know what? That's simply not true. So this woman is showing us here when she gets paid, she just spends her money however she wants in this meme. But the reality is, when someone has a money management plan or they have a budget, they do spend their money, but they spend it purposely in line with what they've decided is important to them. So someone who values having a really nice car may, spend a lot of money on that car. Someone who values family and wants to provide a nice home and security for their family may spend a larger amount of money on their home than anything else. But it's not true that people with money just spend it however and whenever they want. The second myth is those with money spend more than they make. So I'm going to just use a great example of going to buy a car, because many of you are at that place in your life that you may be going to buy a car. So if you have not ever been taught of how to buy a car, let's say you've gotten a job and you know you're making, $100 a week. So you think you're going to go buy a car, be able to pay for the insurance, pay for the maintenance, all those kind of things, but you haven't sat down to really look at what your car payment could be or should be. You actually may just go buy a car that you can't even pay for. So perhaps you buy a car and the payment is $300 and you think, well, I'm making $400, so that should work. But you haven't factored in insurance, or you haven't factored in gas, or what happens when you need new tires. So those with money live below their means or spend less than they make because they know that they need to save. They know that they need to have a safety net. So another great example is when you guys go off to college. Commonly, credit card companies are setting up in student unions, and they have a great gift to give you if you apply for the card. So this is just a quick talk about credit. So let's say they give you a balance of $1,000 and you charge that $1,000 within just a couple months of eating out, of hanging out with friends, of, buying clothes, whatever. And then you go to start paying that credit back, but you didn't ever look at the interest rate. But you start paying this payment back at $30 a month, and it looks like the number is not moving on paper. You think you pay $30 and it should show that you owe $30 less. But that's not true, because that's not how credit works. So if you borrowed $1,000, it would literally take you 125 months, which is over 10 years, to pay that $1,000 back, and you would pay over double the amount you use. So consider this moving forward. Live below your means. Don't actually get more extended than the money you have coming in. The third myth is that people with money never have to go without or sacrifice, and that's absolutely not true. So I don't know how many times in my life I've sacrificed personally. I was a single mom for 7 years when I got out of the military, and there were so many times that people would want to go out to eat after sporting events or different things, but I knew how much money was in my bank account, and it may be just enough to cover my electric bill. And because I valued, taking care of my kids and keeping a roof over their head, we didn't go out to eat. I went home and made dinner. You'll meet people that have money that are driving the Honda Civic instead of the BMW, because they're sacrificing for something else. You never know what it is, but it's not true that people don't go without. So now that we've talked about a couple money myths, let's talk about creating a plan. So there's no exact formula for how you will create a plan for your money, because everyone's plan is different. But in general, a great plan is to have 50% or less in fixed expenses, and we'll talk about what a fixed expense is, 30% in flexible expenses, and 20% in savings. Now, let me tell you, right now, you may be saving for college, you may be saving for a car, you may be saving for a new gaming system. So your plan may be opposite of this. You may have 20% of fixed expenses, 30% flexible, and 50% savings. So here's what I'm talking about when I talk about your fixed, flexible, and this even talks a little bit about luxury. So your fixed is something that does not move. So if you have a car payment, it's the same thing every month. That's a fixed expense. If you have a cell phone payment that you've signed a lease for, and it's the same thing for 2 years, that's a fixed expense. But if you have a cell phone that you go and buy minutes for, and you have a plan based on however many minutes you buy, that would be a flexible plan or a flexible expense. YouTube listed on here, that's actually a luxury expense because you can actually watch YouTube with commercials and not have to pay for it. But just know there's a difference between fixed and flexible spending and then luxury. So luxury is something that we do when we have our bills paid and we have savings put away. So for instance, we need a new shirt, and we may be able to buy a t-shirt for $10, but instead we want the luxury item at $50. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, because if you value that, that's perfect. But what you need to do is budget for that, and you may have to save a couple months to actually get that item instead of putting yourself, your budget out of whack. So you guys are so lucky today, because back in the day we used to have to put our budgets on paper and scratch them out and, keep adding things up, but you guys can do everything on apps today. So I suggest you start a budget on one of these platforms, and you can do it first online on a desktop, whatever it is, and then you can look at it on your device, so that every time you go out and you're shopping, whether you're going out to eat, if you happen to buy your own groceries, if you're moving out and you're on your own and paying your rent, whatever it may be, you can actually look at your budget categories and see how much you put in that budget and how much money you have left. So today we're going to look at mint.com because it's free and it's easy and it's a great one to look at. So if you want to do this, and I suggest you do, whether you have $5 or $50, if you start now and start making this part of your practice, everyday practice, then it'll be easier as you get more money. So you're going to create an account. All of these platforms have a double verification, meaning that you're either going to have to get a text or an email every time you sign in so that they know they're keeping you secure. You can link an account, a banking account or a PayPal account with Mint so that all the information flows through. If you don't have one of those, that's perfectly okay. You can go in and put everything in manually. But next, after you get in there, you can actually create a budget. And so if your bank account is connected with this, your PayPal account, it will automatically show what kind of income is coming in, and it will categorize the expenses. If you don't have that connected, then you would go in and manually do this, but under that budget tab, you can actually create exactly what you need. So how do they provide all of this for free? Well, there are ads on these platforms, so be aware. They're going to try to sell you insurance. They're going to try and get you to sign up for a credit card. Be aware and don't do that, but just know that's how they do that for free. The very bottom left, the great thing about these platforms is they send you notifications. So if you have put $50 in a line item for a budget and you're at $45, they will send you a notification to tell you that you're $5 away from meeting your budget item. Now, does that mean you can't go out to eat maybe and spend $7? No, it just means that you may have to pull from another category within your budget, or you may not go out to eat. I mean, it really is your choice. So now that we've talked about the culture and money and what we learned and, where we are today, we've talked about some great platforms that you can go into and create a budget. We've talked about the formula for a budget. Your formula is going to be very different, maybe compared to your best friend's formula, and that's okay. Now let's talk about some money tips and some really important things to do as you move forward. So the first one is, sometimes we look at a budget or a money management plan as constrictive, but it really is not. When we align our values and our dreams with what we want in our future, then it really is more about freedom. It's freedom to spend in those categories that we think are valuable, and to not waste our money in other areas. Because quite honestly, it's easy to waste money. I think we all know that we can get a certain amount of money and before we know it, it's gone. So I read a stat once that said to get $10,000 in debt, all you have to do is spend 27 extra dollars a day. And before you know it, you're $10,000 in debt. And so, it's so easy as we get credit cards or as we start taking out loans to build that debt if we're not careful about it. So then next one I want to talk about is buying secondhand. So, we all love Amazon, order a lot from Amazon, but what about Amazon Warehouse? Have you tried that before you go to Amazon? Have you thought about eBay, buying things secondhand? Maybe not getting the designer thing, getting something else, but there are ways with almost everything to buy gently used. The next one is know your numbers before you buy. So I encourage you guys, before you sign your name ever on any kind of loan documents, on anything, to make sure you know the final numbers, know what it costs to get a loan. If the loan is not worth the interest rate you're going to pay 2 to 3 times the amount that you are trying to pay for a car or furniture or whatever it is, stop and think, is this really worth it? Or could I do something else? The next one is be willing to sacrifice. I think we all know, if we are in sports, that we sacrifice some of our fun time for practice time. If you're trying to get good grades, you may sacrifice some friend time to do your homework. And so understand that money is the very same way. It's the same thing. You're sacrificing to work towards your dreams. And then that last one is align your spending habits with your values and your dreams. So I want to tell you briefly about my niece, Whitney, who is someone that I believe has truly done this. So she is Apache, and much like I explained that my family didn't really talk about money, my older sister didn't get taught about money, and she had a lot of money difficulties. So there were times in her life that I remember that their electricity was turned off because she couldn't pay the bill. Their water was turned off. I remember a story of them having a hole in the roof, and a raccoon actually fell through into their house one time. And so they had a lot of money challenges. And Whitney started working at age 16, and she's worked ever since then. And at about 24, she decided that she wanted to open her own business because she had 2 kids. And she was ready to start staying home some with her kids and not being in office every day. So she is great at picking flowers and foraging from the land that she lives on. And she started making floral arrangements and selling them. 2 years later, she has an incredible company called Roots and Blooms, and she is making a 6-figure income from doing flower arrangements, from doing weddings, from doing all sorts of community events. But it took her really knowing who she was, what she wanted out of life, and partnering and saving, still working the day job for the first year that she opened this business, and working a lot of hours to get where she is today. So as we wrap this up, I want to ask you what your dreams are. What is important to you? As you look at your future, what are you doing with your future? My very last story that I want to tell you is about my own son, who is 17. I started teaching financial literacy and entrepreneurship about 5 years ago. And he was my guinea pig. I mean, he was like the first person that I ran all of this through. And then he started traveling with me. And he's had an incredible time traveling to reservations in California and Nevada with me. But when he got his first real job at 16, that he was making a steady income, he told us he was going to save his hundreds and spend his dollars. And we had no idea what that meant, but he had decided his formula for living was when he got a paycheck, let's say it's $437, he was going to save the $400 and put it in his savings account and spend the $37. Well, for him, that worked really well because he makes tips throughout the week. And so he has extra money coming in. And so that worked. And within about 7 months of him working, and going to school, and this was all during COVID, so he got some extra work time in because his shop was open. He had $5,000 in his savings account, and his dad and I had not made him save a dime of it. And so today we watch as he, saves for certain things that he wants in life, as he's living his dreams, and he has created this money management plan on his own. I and his father, we've not had a completely perfect money management past. We've had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. And so, you know what? You can do this today too. So if I can help you in any way, here's my email. Like I mentioned before, IDRS does training and technical assistance. We do financial literacy and entrepreneurship with youth. And if there's anything you need, please let me know. I would love to help you even further if you decide to put together a money management plan. I wish you guys all the best and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you so much.